All right. Hello. Great. Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Chris O'Connor. I'm part of the community engagement team at the Royal BC Museum. And I feel so fortunate in the work that I'm doing, um, going around the province to be able to meet and connect with community folks all around the province doing incredible work. And we've been doing community conversations in various parts of the province, actually nearly 100 to this date. And one of the ones that we did recently was right near where we are today, and it was my absolute pleasure and honor to meet our guest today. So we're gonna. I want to introduce him, and also today we're also joined by Derek Larson, who's a collections manager at the Royal BC Museum. But we're going to start today meeting with our very special guest, and on this very special space that we're in right now. So Frank Antoine. So I'm just moving. Moving the. Oops. I didn't test out the camera. Sorry. So. Oops. I didn't test out the camera on the gimbals. It was hidden by the gimbal. So now we're okay. So Frank, hello, welcome.
Hello, how are everybody? My name is Chief Frank Antoine. I'm from the Bonaparte First Nations. But from our language is St'uxwtèws St'uxwtèws. Welcome to our traditional territory on the Bonaparte First Nations.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being our guest today. Can you tell us a little bit about these lands in particular, and this territory, and the deep, rich history of this?
Well, you're on our traditional unceded territory of the Bonaparte First Nations, which just happens that the McAbee Fossil Sites and the Hat Creek Ranch, we just won the RFP for the next 6 years of running and managing these two sites. And it's amazing that this particular site, again, has 50 million plus years here, and the history and the paleontology side of it. But we also have the history of our Indigenous, my community here. So it's just a great relationship to have. And I think as First Nations people, we are the caretakers of the land. And it's important that we are responsible and make sure that this site gets left the way it should be, the preservation behind it, but also learning about the history of the 50 plus million years of here. And it's important that scientific side is important as much as our Indigenous history here.
And even just walking through the trails that have been set up around the McAbee fossil sites, even this morning, the incredible signage that really speaks to both the fossil record here, and also the human habitation in this space, and the rich, deep, layered history of the space as well.
Yeah.
Can you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, I guess when we started doing the signages and everything here, once you walk around, you do see the history, the timelines of how this place was developed. I always think of it as I would say one person describes like unplugging a tub, and all of the rich minerals and all the history, the artifacts that come floating here ended up here. And it's kind of like it's laid itself out, the animals, the insects that were found here, from an international level, where some items were found here that were never found else around the world, and why this place is such an international beacon for paleontology. And that's the short term of it, how I look at it. And I'm very honored to know that the people around the world know this site very well.
Great. And Chief Frank, if we just take a little walk just outside of the space here, we'll be able to see a little bit of the landscape of where we're at.
As you can see, it's how could you not want to be here? And as we move forward with the development of what we like to see built here, they call it a cultural center, kind of like the Squamish Lillooet Cultural Center they built for the 2010 Olympics. Well, we're looking at some concepts here, and just to my right here, up above the two power poles up here, just down below here where the road's cut, there's going to be a nice building there. That hopefully, you know, well, how we're moving forward with that as we're looking at for the next 4 years, we'll have a building here. So again, we're going to invite the world to come to see what we have to offer here on this beautiful piece of land.
Mm-hmm. And when we talk about the McAbee Fossil Beds as a site, as a heritage site, what we're seeing here is just a portion of it. Is that correct?
Yes. Well, right here you see the signage. If you kind of pan over to the sign there, you'll see at the top, you'll see some of the road, a paved road going up, pathways going up to the top. But if you look at 11 o'clock up at the very top, there's going to be a lookout point up there. It's going to be like a sundial, I'll call it. It's going to be like the north, south, west, east. And it's going to show the history of the communities that way. I guess it's almost like a QR card if you want to know where you're headed, especially if you're traveling as a visitor or just wanting to know the local history. That's going to be a good site to where we're actually going to start showcasing. When you put it on there, QR, it's going to talk about Cache Creek. It's going to talk about Wallachine, Sabna, Spencer's Bridge, Cache Creek, Ashcroft. It's going to give you the local history. So when you're leaving this site, now you can actually drive to those sites and say, okay, let's go learn a little bit more about our history here in our area. It's not just an Indigenous history that we want to share, but it's our local history, our settler history that's here, you know, like through the Gold Rush Trail, which is basically what Hat Creek really offers. But here it's going to give you a variety of different history, and that's going to be the coolest piece because the Wallachine history down here, if you look back over in the corner here past this truck at the far end, there's a Wallachine museum down there, and it's back then when this place started growing, it was a high society place for people to come down on paddle boats before they built the bridge in Savna. But there's so many years history, and that's what I mean. There's troughs that came down along the mountains here to feed into that area to grow vegetables and that in the early 1900s. So there's just so much rich history to talk about. And when you talk about these sites, it gives them the platform when you actually go into their communities where they go, and you hear their stories and how much their passion is and why they live here. And a lot of why people moved here is because they love the history, but they also love the territory that we live in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you really, as this morning, I walked up to the very top where I think there will be the sundial, and the view is incredible up there. You really get a sense of the geological history of this space and this valley, just from looking down on it.
Yeah. I mean, from an Indigenous point of view, there's like 80 plus pit homes across the road here, and as time moves forward, we're going to start owning that, sharing that data history. There's CN train bridge down below a station. There's just so much history. You get up to that piece, they call it $1 million view. But there's also a pit house in the back corner. So there's about a 7-8 kilometer trail that goes right around the whole piece of the mountain and comes back. And there's another interest of people. We're looking at bike trails. I really like to connect our history from here over to Hat Creek. At one point, they're going to be building trails that way. It's just so many opportunities to have different types of groups wanting to be here. The hiking group, the biking group, horses. I mean, it's just going to grow. And we're looking at building definitely our winter homes so people can stay here overnight. Teepees are great. You know, again, this is the Eastern teepee that basically our Eastern brothers, sisters used back in the flatlands. We use it as more of a flag right now, but one day we're going to have our homes, which is called winter homes, that were underground. So again, we're going to start shaping it into our history, but we also included 4 other communities that are going to be a part of this, what we call our St'uxwtèws Bonaparte nonprofit society. And Whispering Pines, High Bar, Pavilion, Skeetchison, and ourselves are going to be looking at how we're going to grow this site together. Even though it's on our traditional land, we never had borders. We always had overlap, so why not share the rich history here with their history? We just have 2 beautiful guides, Naomi and Nikki, who come from the Pavilion community, are here for our interpreters this year. And they were so glad to hear that, you know, bringing their history here is so important with that sundial. When you point to where their home is, now they can talk about where they're from and not just talk about specific history, but the overall history.
So Chief Frank, when for people that are watching that might want to come visit, perhaps this summer, to this space, what would they need to know?
I guess it's just the timeframes. I think once we get our website, we have a website that's coming up. So you can probably look online here of when our times are going to be open and what we're doing here and the timeframes we're going to have. Some events that we're going to be hosting here, hopefully over the summer, again, developing those. But because we just started, it's our first year, so we're gonna kind of keep it low key this year. But next year we're gonna have more things invited, more things to do here as we start wrapping up. Because by the end of this fall, we're gonna have a 5-year strategic plan. So each year is going to be that development and that infrastructure that we're putting in place, but also bringing the people here who are wanting to come and work here.
Um, so, um, yeah, and there was actually when I came here, there was someone who just passed by, actually from near Vancouver, near Victoria, who was just traveling around the region and didn't even know about this site, so stopped in just to look and hear a little bit about the site. So sometimes I imagine people come here knowing about it, and sometimes they happen upon it.
You know why? Because the steepy is an attraction.
Right.
And they say, oh, Indigenous tourism is a fast growing industry. What I've been involved with now since 2007, and seeing the sites like this, especially there's a lot of people that come up here waiting for this gate to be open.
Yeah.
And there's some people just happen to come along and say, hey, there's a place to visit because there's parking here and they see cars here. It's like anything, it's an attraction.
Right.
And as the summer comes, there's a lot of people just show up on their own without knowing it's on their route. And we're really grateful that they come in. And again, there is going to be an admission charge to this site. And at once we get going, but there's people like now, like when they come in, I tell Adrian, who's our operations manager, just let them in, let them walk around. It's our home. Let them come to our home. It's going to be a good place for them to come see.
Great. And then this home, to speak a little bit of the fossil record of this space, I wanted to bring in Derek Larson, who's the collection manager of the Royal BC Museum. And Derek, first, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm getting major jealousy of your beautiful blue sky outdoors, and meanwhile I'm stuck inside.
Oh yeah. Well, you'll come here soon.
Yes.
And can you speak a little bit to Chief Frank was talking about the cultural significance of this space and the important stewardship that is going on in this space. Can you speak about the fossil record of why is the McAbee Fossil Bed so important as a site in BC and Canada and the world?
Certainly. So the McAbee fossil beds are 52 million years old. So they're Eocene in age. It's after the age of the dinosaurs. And in the shot that Chris was showing of sort of the cliffs, the rocks that you can see, those are actually the stacked beds, many different layers of lake beds that were deposited about 52 million years ago. So there was a lake on the McAbee site 52 million years ago. And at that time, there was all manner of animals and plants and insects living around the lake. And when these animals died, or in a storm, various things would get washed into the lake and get buried in very fine muds. They would preserve in pretty exceptional circumstances. And we have from McAbee thousands of fossils of exquisitely preserved things that were living 52 million years ago from the site. And it's a hugely important site. It's a protected site. So people aren't able to just, go there willy-nilly. It's like we have our stewards, the Bonaparte First Nation, that are going to be guiding people that come to the site. So, but it's a hugely significant site, and there are currently paleontologists that are working on material that has been collected previously, and hopefully, in the future, even more material could potentially be collected as well, because there's there's so much, and the fossil beds are so rich with this very detailed preservation and preserving things that you don't normally see preserved. Things like leaves, things like feathers, things like insects and spiders that you don't usually see in the fossil record. They're very, very rare because usually fossils only preserve the very hard parts like bones. Here we've got bones, but also, you know, everything else preserved as well. So I've got some fossils here I can show. But yeah, if there's any questions or anything like that about the fossil site first in the chat or anything, happy to take those.
And I'll just jump in for a second, Derek, that also that speaks a little bit too, because as Chief Frank was saying, there'll be this cultural center here, and I imagine within that center there'll be fossils to look at as well, so that people can see both fossils on the site from the site, but then within a space like the Royal BC Museum as a provincial museum, as a as caring and caretaking fossils as well. Is that fair to say that there'll be?
Yeah, well, we're working with this center that we're building. It's going to be an educational center too with Thompson Rivers University. And this is where Tom Dickinson really is helping us with the paleontology side of it, is how are we going to build these classrooms, not only from the inside of that center, but also the outside. There's outside stuff that we can look at. So having his expertise is working in this, just like Derek. I mean, this would be your dream job up here to come up here to help build this on your paleontology side. It definitely will bring that relationship closer. So we get a better understanding of what you're just explaining today. And because it's the next generation that we're building it for, you know, as much as we do it as work and it's our passion, it's passing on that legacy to the next generation to carry on our history. So that's important that we both do it on the same level, and basically on the same place.
And Adrian, who's the site manager earlier, was talking about how he's dedicating 2 days a week for school visits to be here as well. So speaking of that next generation, to really have young folks be on the land and learning from the land and learning from the history, all the different layered histories.
Yeah,
sorry, Derek, you were about to say something.
I was going to say, and that's so important. Just you know, in protecting and preserving the site is so important for future generations, so that, you know, it's not just going to be here and gone again. You know, in this modern world where everything is constantly churning, and actually having, you know, a space to be like, no, this area, it needs protection, and it needs to be here for the future generations.
Do you want to show one of the?
Yeah, let's look at some fossils. I'm just going to switch over to my camera. All right, so some of the stuff is a little bit hard to see. Remember that any of these fossils, they don't have the decency to die and get buried in a very consistent pose. But this is a pretty cool slab. This is a fossil woodpecker, and you can see here we've got these bones, which are yellow. We've got a leg preserved here. It looks a little bit like a chicken thigh or something like that. And then all of the dark area surrounded is actually a mush of feathers. And then we've got a few other things here. We've got some fossil leaves and things that are preserved around here. But this is very significant as well. And it's not showing up super great on the camera, but this point right here is actually the beak over here. So we actually have the skull of this woodpecker right here. So it's kind of it looks a little bit roadkill, but you can sort of see, you know, like the leg and some of the wing pieces here. But it's to find something with all of those soft tissues that's 52 million years old is very, very rare in the fossil record. So it's exciting things like this. Things like fossil birds. I'll show you some fossil fish with sort of like every bone and soft tissue was preserved in the rock. So it's pretty exciting. I'm going to move on.
So Derek, how do you know that that's a woodpecker? What are you seeing that makes it clear that that's a woodpecker rather than another kind of bird?
I didn't do that identification myself. There were some other paleontologists that had studied this specimen and pulled out some features. So I'm not entirely certain what features those were off the top of my
But
head.
there's enough of a
There are
clue that
characteristics certainly of the bones that can help identify
right.
on the skull and also on the limbs, various features, crests and bumps, and the shape of the bones that help determine what species it is.
Great. You were going to show one more?
Yeah, well, I've got a few more actually.
Okay.
Also, while you switch them, there is a question about how did these fossils specifically form? Is there something about the specific location where the McAbee fossil collection is that made it so unique to have all of these fossils?
Yeah, so I sort of addressed that when introducing the site. It's a lake bed, and it was a lake for hundreds, if not thousands, of years. And so each year, there was very fine-grained lake sediment accumulating in the bottom of the lake, and that very fine-grained sediment, as well as anoxic, so lack of oxygen conditions in the bottom of the lake, were able to things that got buried in the mud didn't decay as you would expect them to and sort of disappear. And so that's why we get some of this exceptional preservation. It would get stuck in the mud and preserved in that mud for millions of years. And there's many, many layers at McAbee that preserve whole ecosystems that were living there. So here's some example of some of the other animals here. I can zoom in a little bit, maybe a little bit better. There we go. So we've got this is a fossil fish. I believe this is a myzon, which is just a short skulled sort of a guppy-like fish. But you can see here, like each of these bones is like exquisitely preserved. We've got the skull over here, all of the fins. This one I think is very exciting. I don't think very many people have looked at this yet, but there's seems to be some darker bands on this fossil, and here there's like a darker patch here, which looks suspiciously like a fish liver. So I have a sneaking suspicion that we might be seeing some of the patterning or internal organs on this fish, which would be pretty exciting and pretty exceptional. So that's a pretty exceptional looking fish. This one's always fun. That's a fossil spider, and it's a pretty good size too. So that's something. It's yeah, you can probably see the central body there, and then the multiple legs coming off of it. So that was a spider that had fallen into the lake and been preserved. So that's a pretty rare find. And then this one over here, this one's a little bit. Oh, there we go. It just lightened up there a little bit. This is a fossil crane fly. So you can see ever so slightly the wing back here. Yes, back here. I believe there's another wing tucked in there, and then these are the legs. This is the body of this crane fly. So that's pretty exciting. That's also a good size. We've just got a few more things to look at. We also have extensive fossil plants in the area. Here are, highlight these a little bit. This one's pretty neat. This is a fossil cone that has actually been preserved three-dimensionally. So that's a cone from a conifer tree that has been preserved. It's 52 million years old. And then here, this is a fossil flower. So this is called Florisantia. The center of the flower is right there, and then it has very sort of like broad petals around that center part. And similar to the plants in some ways, and some people might think that they are the same thing, but we also have fossil feathers as well. So in addition to the birds that we have preserved, we also have, so that's a nice feather right there. You can see hopefully that the feathers are composed of multiple little fibers that are very, very fine, and they're together. So this is an asymmetrical feather, so we know that that's a flight feather. This is a more of a downy-like feather, and then this piece is also a downy-like feather, so it's more of a fluffy feather. So yeah, these sorts of fossils don't preserve at very many sites, and we're only really beginning to study and scratch the surface of the very rich fossil record at the McAbee site. So we've got a very good collection here that's been collected by a number of different avocational paleontologists through the years, as well as professional paleontologists, and we're hoping that our collection will be of use to the Bonaparte First Nation and others as we all learn about the fossil history of the site.
I was just thinking also, just Derek, as you were going through those, just remembering the signage that's here. There's a great signage around insects on the trails. I was also thinking about how like great diversity of birds, like living birds, just walking around the trails. But then I was thinking you were showing the fish salmon, the fish, which wasn't a salmon, but there is signage up on the trails about salmon in
Yes.
particular, and there's an image of a salmon fossil.
Yes, there are salmon fossils as well. It's quite a bit bigger, so it was a little bit difficult to move
Yeah,
to get
totally.
here for the camera. But yes, there's fossil salmon known from the site as well, which is very exciting. There's a huge diversity of fish. There's a huge diversity of everything. Like I said, there's thousands of fossils, hundreds of different species, many of them new to science. So it's very exciting.
Right. And then, so I just want to bring Chief Frank back into this, just in terms of that sign in particular, but also other signage that you have, but maybe in particular with the salmon. Do you want to speak about that sign in particular?
This is a perfect time. Just if you look back down towards the river here, there's a Thompson River coming through here, and then it meets up in Littlewood. But when that river is out here, we just had our first salmon camp, which we haven't held for I don't know how many decades, how many generations, but a couple of years ago when the dominant run was coming, we actually exercised our rights and we worked with CN to actually hold a fish camp just down below here. And that's never happened in our community since the settlers came. So it was really an honor. I actually got a video on that I'd like to share with you, with the guests if they're interested. But yeah, we did our drying down there. We dried our salmon, you smoked our salmon. We did all types, and it's a sockeye run was what we actually did. The Adams River run is what they call it. But it was something that's huge and significant for our people, are definitely for supplying us for food to the winter. But it's something we still practice today every year. It's just that there's a high-low peak when the salmon run. But I think it'll be in the next couple of years, we'll be doing another fish camp down below here. So that's what we're looking forward to as we move forward with the fish. And yes, we have them up here, and it's definitely, Derek, I really thank you for sharing a little bit of that. But at the end of the day, we still live and breathe our culture here by doing it as our lifestyle. So it's a big part of our lifestyle still in our community.
This is a live stream here, but we'll have this on our YouTube page, so we can add that video to that. It would be great. I'm really looking forward to seeing that.
Yeah, we'll definitely make sure that that's a part of that. And so as we move forward, that's something I want to make sure that we want to show you our history. And to do that, we got to share you the videos that we have from an Indigenous view, from our Indigenous lens. Yeah. It's really important because it really educates you how responsible, how we are still connected to the water, the land, and the animals. Similar to what you're talking about, Derek. It's amazing that it goes back that far.
And that's what I was really struck by the signage. Really love the language of the signage, just speaking, really deepening in and centering Indigenous ways of knowing and being, while also sort of like making clear that the deep, rich history of this.
Well, in our language, we call our 17 communities represent the St'uxwtèws Ulu, but the St'uxwtèws Chin is our language. And it really differs into what the specifics are, because once we put our language on basically those three components. The Selkwa is the water, and Tamilk is the land. The animals, there's a variety of names for the animals, but as far as we put that on the land and the water, it really resonates because that's the responsibility that we have when you come here. It's like it's part of who our ancestors were.
Yeah.
Kind of like the fossils, and it's telling a story. And now we're telling a story today again.
Okay. Yeah, and each of the signage, there's words to learn as well. And I really appreciated the language. It said, or the text, it said, there are 50 letters within the language, and it could be hard to speak, but trying and learning is how we connect and how we connect with the land. So,
and it's, you know what it is? It's spending the time here and spending time with the people. Once you spend time with the people, that relationship to the land and the respect comes back from a different viewpoint again. And this is what we really love about our schools, local schools here, they're wanting to come up, but also now schools are going to start coming. We really want to focus on the educational piece. And with Derek's paleontology background and that history is so important that our kids learn the two worlds that are coming together, that we've lived in harmony. Nobody leads us, we all share it. And that's St'uxwtèws, helping one another understand each other's history, but also sharing the stories that come with it.
Great. And I know, Jenny, you shared the learning portal pathway that we have on and the Royal BC Museum's learning portal. There's a whole pathway, a whole area about the McAbee Fossil Beds. And I think this video can join into that page as well, in addition to other videos that you might recommend, Chief Frank.
Oh, we have so many. And again, we just had a celebration last week with the grand opening. That's going to come out this week about the relationships of how we're building these sites up as far as a public opportunity to come, the local people to come, the Indigenous groups that are coming together now, the communities that are coming, like I said, the 4 communities that are coming, the 5 communities that are coming together. It's just, it's about time that we're actually talking about the real truth and reconciliation, not reconciliation now. And this is going to give us that opportunity now to start building that, because I believe in doing, not just saying. So, and it's kind of happening now after 8 years. It's finally come to where it needs to be.
You embody that, like you're doing, and you were talking about a little earlier, talking about how this has been a long time coming, and it's been a lot of work to get to this place. So thank you so much for your role, and I know others within the community as well, but your role in particular is.
It's an important role for sure, but I really learned from, again, to be a good leader, you have to follow, you got to listen, then you got to follow. And that's all I'm doing, because what I'm building here is platforms for all people to come to be and to share that. And once we build a cultural center, once we build the infrastructures that we need here so we all can share that, it's like sitting around a dinner table, sitting around a clock, nobody's ahead of the other. It's really important that we think that way ahead of time, even though we're leading it in a sense of that direction. But when we sit around, it's never about us leading anything. It's about us sharing what we want to be put on that table. And it's the great thing, because we work in a clock rotation, and each hand represents, whether it's the youth, the elders, the adults, the guests, the visitors, the locals. I look at the organizations that are here, especially from a tourism perspective, but also it shows us the collaboration of how we actually lived in harmony back then. Just like these animals, there's feast or famine. We have to learn to work together to make it better. Food sovereignty is another piece that I'm building across the road here. It's just to help each one another. As a human being, we need to work together, especially, and we're going back to the simple way of life. And when you hear about sustainability, biosphere, sustainability, all these fancy words that I hear, it's really getting back to how our grandparents and our grandparents before us lived in a very simple form.
Great. Thank you so much. Jenny, are there any questions for Chief Frank or Derek in the chat?
No, there hasn't been any questions, but this has been great. We did have one comment on Facebook saying, "We are so lucky to have a site like this close to home. We'll definitely be planning a visit."
Oh, great. And just if people haven't been to this area, or like maybe in relation to Kamloops, it's about an hour,
45 minutes,
45 minutes west of Kamloops. and about 10 minutes east of Cache Creek. So yeah, such beautiful country, and this site in particular captures that so well. The hoodoos, I was reading in the site the signage about the story behind that they're yeah, do you want to speak to that?
Well, I guess from my perspective, I think that could be a Derek one, really.
Yeah.
For me. But just the hoodoos, if you look back, if you pan up in the back corner here, this is going towards east, and when you go east, behind me, this is where our community called St'uxwtèws is, and there's a lot of hoodoos up in that area, and there's also a place called the Center of the Earth back there. There's just so many landmarks that we have, and if you go back east towards Kamloops, there's a Coyote Rocks, and there are landmarks. So again, there's just so many. If you could spend a week here, we get to be able to take you to those sites. But most people drive by. We have the main highway here going by us, and it's you know, and I always hear that word location. I'm actually flipping that to direction. 4 directions in our culture is the 4. It covers the whole area. So with a place like the hoodoos, it's just one significant place, one thing to talk about, what probably Derek talk about more. But it's just the rich history of the people that live in these valleys, that live in these mountains, and you know what they call home. It's just an amazing place to be, and no matter where you go here and you look down the view, hopefully we can come over here. It's about your left today. Chris, when you looked up top, there's nothing but valley.
Yeah.
It's beautiful here. Yeah, Derek, I think it's raining in Victoria, I think. But I could tell you here, it's always around 30. It's in the 30 to 40 degree range during the summer. It gets very hot. But when you're here between basically 6 o'clock to 10 o'clock, it's the perfect weather. And usually from 6 o'clock to 10 o'clock at night are the perfect times to come here if you're acclimatized with the weather. But if you love the heat, I grew up in the semi-desert. This is what the semi-desert looks like. But when you get views like that, you know, when you look at to see the mountains and the terrain, it's just a beautiful site to be on. And I tell you, lucky Adrian has a house of a little cabin up here now.
He was telling me about that.
And he gets to see that I call a $1 million view. But I call it the $50 million view because that's the history that we're learning.
Yeah. Nice.
$52 million, 52 million.
Nice.
Is what I call it.
I like that. Derek, do you have any final words or questions for Chief Frank? Or
no, I really like the $52 million view. That's great. Yeah, it's really exciting. Can't wait to come out and visit and see the sites and see the fossils and the rocks, and yeah, looking forward to it.
And then when you were talking about the cultural center a few minutes ago, Chief Frank, over your shoulder is where it will be.
Yeah.
So
right over to there.
So I'm imagining, say, like 5-10 years from now, watching this again and then knowing that is there and in place. So.
2028, that's my goal.
Cool. So thank you so much, Derek. Thank you so much, Jenny, in the back, and thank you so much, Chief Frank, for being the guest today and host. And thank you so much for your stewardship of this land. It's real, both this site and the historic Hack Creek Ranch, which I haven't been to yet, but I'm going to go this afternoon, are in really good care, and it's really inspiring to see. So thanks everyone for joining into RBCM at Home. Tomorrow I'm still on the road, so I'm going to be in Enderby, and I'm going to be at the Cardiff Miller Art Warehouse, which is going from 52 million years back in time to a couple years. It's contemporary art and an amazing art gallery space in Enderby, BC. So that's going to be at 4 o'clock tomorrow, again on Zoom and Facebook Live. We'll hope to do more of these in the future, especially as we're traveling around the province and learning so much. When you were saying the importance of listening and learning, that's really the heart of our community engagement work, is really just being present, listening, learning, and then putting that learning into practice.
The best way I always say, when you arrive as a guest, but you leave as a friend. I think that's the most easiest complex way of doing it, because when you bring your family to your home, you serve them everything you possibly can. And that's how we are as Indigenous people. We've always been that through for generations, that, you know, when you arrive on our land, we want to make sure that you're comfortable and you're taken care of. But also when you leave with something, and that's the respect of where we live. And that's the most important piece.
Best final words ever.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Nice meeting you, Derek.